Back full on to the Commanders here on the Take Command podcast. Logan Paulson there, Craig Hoffman here, and one of the podcasts that everyone waits for, Logan. They want to know how the rookies played in 2024. Everyone loves the rookies. This is your last chance to love on them as rookies, because now they're just going to be those second-year guys. There's new rookies, new bombshells entering the villa.
Yeah, and this is going to be a lot of fun to do. Like, there's been times where I think last year is a good example where we're kind of like, I don't know, this didn't feel great. But there's lots of really positive feelings in this group, and I'm excited to talk about them.
For sure. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to make this real simple. We are just going to go from Jayden Daniels to Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and actually we will throw in the Tyler Owens, Colson Yankoff, and some other names that Logan wants to mention as UDFAs at the end here. So we're just going to go in order. We're going to hit Jayden first, and you sickos who really want the deep cuts, stay tuned. They're coming. So, with the second overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders selected Jayden Daniels. Analysis went well.
Went really well. Went about as well as it could have gone. And it's not just the product on the field. I think, there was, like when Peyton Manning was in the NFL, there was this kind of consensus, even though he led the league in interceptions, that it was a good thing. Like his process was correct. It was the same thing with Andrew Luck. Like he was going to be a good player because he was competitive, he was tough, he was smart, he understood the game at a high level, both those guys. And so not only did this season go well, but I feel like I'm leaving this season with the same kind of confidence that year two will go well because of his preparation, because of his professionalism, because of his work ethic, things we've talked about ad nauseum. And so that's where it's like icing on the cake. And, going through his throws, going through his games, like there's not a lot of criticism like of him. Like he didn't turn the football over a ton. He took a couple sacks in the New Orleans game, but got better the next week and got better for the rest of the season. Played a couple times against the best defense in football and didn't look like it was too much for him. I mean, if there's one criticism of his game, it's that he doesn't always make subtle movements in the pocket the way that some of those elite pocket passers do. But I think that's something he will work on and get better at. He definitely has the physical skill set to get that done, but he anticipates throws. He threw over the middle of the field. He ran the offense well. He made checks at the line of scrimmage. I'm not saying anything.
And the things that we thought were good coming in were as good or better than advertised.
Correct.
Like his deep ball accuracy, his quick release to get some of these balls out to the sideline on the hitches, and like those things that he threw really well in college, like that translated to the league. He was awesome on that stuff, and that stuff's hard to do. And the anticipation he threw with, I think what surprised you the most about him? Because I think there's kind of two things that surprised me. One, getting to see how quick his release was in person. And that's, obviously like we weren't on the road. We weren't at LSU watching games. Had we gone to actually watch him in college, then maybe we're not as surprised by that. But like it didn't jump off the tape quite as much as you see him throw in person and you're like, whoa, that thing is. And I think it got better too. Like that was the other thing. Like I think it improved. And that's kind of my other thing is just his ability to adapt was something that is almost hard to understand. Although, considering the jump he made between his junior and senior year, maybe we should have anticipated it. But guys don't get better at this rate in the NFL during the season. And his ability to just not make the same mistake twice was, I knew he was a smart guy. I knew he studied hard. I knew he worked hard. But damn, to get that results that quickly and that efficiently out of that work is... Bravo, Jayden. And that I think gets us as excited as anything for him to continue to grow moving forward.
And I think I agree. The quick release, the footwork was something that surprised me in person, just how tight it was, and something that I've changed how I evaluate quarterbacks because of how important I see that being now. I think the number one thing for me, above all other things, you talk about the poise, was the consistency. Like, I wish I could. I'm not smart enough to articulate how hard it is to be locked in for 18 games in an NFL season. It is so hard. It's like you got to be at your best every single week with all this adversity, all this conversation about you circling around the NFL. Like it was hard for me, and I was like a bottom of the roster guy. Like just the amount of work each week to kind of get back to that pinnacle, fall down again, and then run up and do it again. And so to see him do that, like every week I was like waiting. I was waiting for the stumble. I was waiting for him to trip. I was waiting because that's just what happens. Guys can't consistently do it. And
right. Not just the rookies. Like vets don't have great games every week.
And so for him to come back each and every week, trust the process, do the same thing, that consistent, methodical, serial killer efficiency that he had was just that blew me away. Because I know how hard that is. And I talked to Santana about it. I talked to Fletcher about it. I talked to Smoot, talked to B. Mitch. Like, they know how hard it is because they've done it at a high level. And it's just like, there's no words to describe that level of just maniacal consistency. And it's hard. It's hard mentally to do that. It's hard physically to do that. But he did it. And so that's the thing, again, amongst a myriad of other things that gives me a lot of confidence going into next year is if you can do that, if you can be Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and just lock in like an absolute lunatic, like, that's what greatness looks like. Like, you heard the stories about Patrick Mahomes, same thing. We were just talking about him. Like, they'd have like a team cookout, and he's in the car reviewing film and studying notes before he walks out to hang out with the guys. Like, you just got to make sure every box is checked every week and do it for 20 weeks. And he just, and at the podium, he was great. No, not too high with the highs, not too low with the lows, just as consistent as a heartbeat. And man, that was incredibly impressive.
Yeah, just good dude, good football player. And like not a lot of weaknesses in his game, which is I think the fun part for us and the terrifying part for defensive coordinators are like, okay, well, what do we want to make him do? I don't know. Good at everything. Hope he has a bad week. Well, with that kind of work ethic, that kind of preparation, that possibility definitely comes down quite a bit. By the way, we certainly expect this weekend at NFL Honors for Jayden to be named the Offensive Rookie of the Year, arguably the best rookie season we've ever seen from a quarterback, certainly in the last 10 years or so. So preemptive congratulations to Jayden, and hopefully that doesn't sound silly. If not, there's going to be riots for considering how good he was. I mean, Brock Bowers was unbelievable this year, but doing it as a rookie quarterback compared to a tight end.
He doesn't play quarterback, man. And
I mean, what do you know about how hard playing quarterback versus tight end is?
Well, I will say this, man. Like, it was an incredible year by Brock Bowers. I just went back and watched like probably 50 of his receptions, and dude was balling. But
he's incredible.
It doesn't, the amount of responsibility you have at the position to win 2 playoff games, like, it's not close. So
yeah, even it's a regular season award. Even take out the playoff stuff, it's Jayden Daniels award. So that should happen in NFL Honors on Saturday night. Okay, second pick for the Commanders. They have multiple second rounders, of course, thanks to the trade that they made with Philly. Jer'Zhan Newton they took at number 36, and I think Newton had an interesting year because there are definitely flashes. And I think the number one thing I love about Jer'Zhan Newton is that dude is hustling 100% of the time. Like, you flip on the tape and you go, I get why Adam Peters loves you. And you watch it at Illinois. You watch it this year from the first snap that he had. He's hustling 10 yards down the field after ball carriers. Like, if it's a pass completion, he didn't get home on his rush. Like, he's trying to go make the tackle down the field. It is nuts how hard that guy plays. But I think we've only scratched the surface of Jer'Zhan Newton because he came into the year hurt. And I think that has to affect how we evaluate him. So, Logan, if you could, first, like, how did he play in a vacuum? And then once you add the context onto it, what does that mean for him moving forward?
Yeah, I think Jer'Zhan was an interesting watch upon like review because he does things that you like as a commander, right? He works hard. Like you said, he works hard, plays physically. He's got a little bit of juice to him, like that shows up, the snap, the pop, his ability to get hands on people. Like, there's some good stuff there. But I do think just getting used to kind of the NFL speed and as NFL physicality of the offensive line is something that he's got to kind of work on and develop with, And I think, again, that's where I kind of look back at his offseason or lack thereof because of the foot injury and say, like, this is probably what we should have expected, right? He's going to have a hard time sinking doubles because he hasn't been able to work out his legs a ton, right? He hasn't had an opportunity to kind of get in practice and have guys lean on him and work those techniques the same way because of the injury. So, that's one thing that sticks out to me is it just there were times where he looked like he was a little bit physically outmatched, and I think that's something that can improve, especially when you understand better maybe how to utilize him and where to put him and how to maximize his ability. But yeah, man, he's I'm excited to see what this kind of feels a little bit like a kind of a freebie year for him. I'm excited to see what it looks like in year 2 with a full off season with Chad Englehart and the strength staff, like getting everything right, getting everything worked out. Because I do think you see, again, the work ethic, the finish, the physical snap can you cultivate some more pass rush moves? Those are things that stick out to me. But I give him like a C minus kind of area for the year. But I think that's okay for a rookie defensive tackle to have a grade like that. And it's tough, man. It's tough playing defensive line in the NFL now, especially with how good these offensive linemen are. But that's kind of my high level thought on that.
Yeah, I think he's such an interesting player in this defense, and to think also like, what do you want to pair him with moving forward? He is a penetrating type, super quick. He's a little bit undersized, and in that way, there's like a redundancy with Jer'Zhan. And I think at times we saw them both be more successful this year playing next to the Sheldon Days, the Carl Davises, because there's that big body. And so when you look at free agency, like if Odighizuwa from Dallas is the guy that Dan Quinn's got circled because of how good he was there, like how does that type of player, because he's also, if I'm remembering correctly, like more of a penetrating, quick type. Like, is that something that can work, like having two of those and building your defensive line around that? Or is that kind of what killed them in the playoff game against Green Bay a couple years ago? What killed them at times this year with the run defense? And do they need to get some bigger bodies and say like, yes, Jer'Zhan are an essential part of what we do because of his quickness, because of what he can do, but there's got to be the right pairing with him. Like how, I guess that's kind of the moving forward conundrum that I certainly have fielded questions about from fans, but I'm certainly wondering myself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I don't really have a great answer and I think Odighizuwa is a really good comparison for Jer'Zhan, because when he came in, like it was a little bit of a slow roll. Like Odighizuwa, I think, was more explosive as a pass rusher in his first couple of years, but didn't really have a defined role. And I honestly think that that's probably something that they were thinking about with Jer'Zhan. Like if Duran and John are healthy and he's a rotational guy, I think you feel much better about his year on the whole. But when you got to start a lot of football games and play a ton and kind of that whole process is accelerated, like think about how deliberate and how careful they were with Brandon Coleman, just as an example, right? Like They really kind of brought him along at a good pace. And then because of injuries, they weren't able to do that the same way with Jer'Zhan. And I think that's where you see kind of, again, some of him having to grow up as a player. And I think Odighizuwa, you watch him now compared to when he first got in the league, and you see a guy who understands exactly what he needs to do from a physicality standpoint, from a quickness standpoint, how to penetrate, when to penetrate. And I think those things, if you can learn them, make you just a much more devastating player. And I think that could be the ultimate arc for Jer'Zhan, a guy that becomes very, very effective. I think Odighizuwa was a second round pick also, but like learning from a guy like that can be really, really advantageous. Like kind of knowing I don't have to sit this double team. I can penetrate this. I can have these keys and these tells. Because you watch Odighizuwa now and you're like, man, this guy's pretty effective on a down-to-down basis when it comes to stopping the run. And if that can help him mature, I'm talking about Jer'Zhan now, and kind of develop into that guy, like lean into your superpower, I think that's an advantage too. And so the pairing isn't as important to me as the developmental arc. And if you can get a mentor in their form that says, hey, like this is how I do it, this is what you should be looking for. Listen to these calls. Like, hey, if you hear doom, if you hear deuce, if you hear tram, it's a gap scheme run. Like get ready to penetrate and get in here quick. If you hear like A, B, C, you're on the back side of the run. Like let's get those things communicated from a veteran player. I think that might be really helpful for him too, just to kind of help him maximize what he does well and have a model of a guy who does it the way he should be doing it.
Yeah, no, that all tracks. And for a guy like Odighizuwa too, playing off of Micah Parsons changes his entire outlook. And
yes.
Not to just bring this around to like Myles Garrett, but like whoever, whether it's a Josh Sweat, whether it's a Myles Garrett, whether it's who, they get some edge some other way in the draft. But like if they can all of a sudden put some more attention on some of the outside guys, what does that do for Jer'Zhan inside in the future? I think that's definitely something interesting to watch with him. Any more Jer'Zhan notes before we move on to Mikey?
No, I'm excited. He's one of those pieces where it's like, and this is the thing with rookies, you got to remind yourself, and I have to remind myself when I'm watching, like Brandon Coleman, I watched a ton of film of him last night, is that they are developing. And so, like, if you think the ceiling is still there, like, this is fine. Like, this is part of the learning and growing experience of learning how to become a professional football player in the NFL. So I think that's something else to kind of remind yourself. It doesn't need to be perfect, but I think the things that you talked about first, like the work ethic, the hustle, the physicality, the want to, those things kind of, again, in the same way that a prospect coming out of college does those things, kind of lays and you say, he does the stuff that you can't coach really, really well. Or it's harder to kind of motivate a guy to do that. He's going to get better what does year 2 look like? And I think this year upcoming for him is going to be a big year to kind of, again, because this year was so unfair to him. I think, the injury, the lack of just weight room time, Jon gets hurt, you're playing way more than you thought you were going to have to play. That whole cycle is tough for him. But I think despite that, he did some good things. And so I want to see what he looks like in year 2.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we probably should have said this off the top in general, but Jayden ruins everything because he was so damn good.
He was amazing.
But what guys are as rookies has has a limited bearing on what they ultimately will become. Like, if you struggle your rookie year, that doesn't mean that you're a bust. And if you're great your rookie year, that doesn't mean you're going to the Hall of Fame. Like, how do you continue to grow? And Jer'Zhan's going to be, I think, a great example of that. Next guy up, the first of the 2 picks they got in return for Cooper DeJean, or what ultimately became Cooper DeJean, that 50 and 53 for 40 swap that they made with Philadelphia, Mike Sainristil. And, Logan, I think we should, for a moment, because it is something that still comes up on occasion, like revisit that trade a little bit. Yeah. Because I think, like, Mikey's value, one, I still think he could be a tremendous player, like really high level, and getting him back inside is, I think, something that's on their to-do list. He really did a good job outside this year. He had some games that were really bad. He had some games that were really good. That is playing corner in the NFL. Nevertheless, is a rookie in the NFL. But what he brings as a leader, and what he brings as just a guy that is probably going to be, Jayden is going to be right there with him. But like, if you tell me who's got the C on their chest and who is like the guy in that locker room 2 years from now, it's Mike Sainristil. And 10 years from now, it's Mike Sainristil. Like, that's what kind of leader they got. The Eagles got a guy in Cooper DeJean who played at a borderline Pro Bowl level as a rookie, and that's also really helpful. And I don't think he's a bad dude from anything that I've ever heard about Cooper DeJean. And so there is kind of still this question of like, and we'll talk about Ben Sinnott in a second. And he obviously didn't have a great rookie year, to say the least, but like that trade of, you could have just taken DeJean. If to me, it feels like it just works out for both teams, and you can't really look at what the Eagles did and like, yeah, they got a great dude and it's in your division, your team twice a year. That sucks. But considering that they're trying to build up this culture and build up this thing with staying power, getting Mikey Sainristil was an A+ pick for me, assuming that he becomes what we think he can as a player. But I think it's worth not only just looking at Mikey in general in the year he had, but kind of revisiting that trade as well.
Yeah, I think that's always an interesting context. And, again, like Cooper DeJean didn't run. He didn't run coming out. He was hurt. He had the foot injury. That might have clouded the evaluation. And I remember watching Cooper and kind of wondering, like, what he would be at the next level, right? And so I think a lot of people probably evaluated him as a safety. And you had just brought in, Jeremy Chin, you got Quan Martin, you got some pieces there that you feel good about, even Percy Butler, Derek Forrest too, like just some guys, you feel like you got some good depth there. And so if you're evaluating him as a safety and maybe not a true nickel, that changes kind of my perception of the trade. And I don't know exactly what they're looking at there, but I do think, Mike Sainristil, in terms of what he did this year, I think can't be overstated. I think he did something this year that I don't think Cooper DeJean could have done. And so what I mean by that is, like, I think Mikey can play nickel. I think Cooper is an excellent nickel. We saw that this year.
Yeah, but their whole defense just went to a whole new level when he came into the lineup this year.
Him and Quinyon, they both did a great job. But I also think that I don't think Cooper DeJean can play outside. And I was skeptical about Mike Sainristil doing that, but he was able to do that. So like the flexibility that he brought to the defense and his ability to turn the football over, I think is something that is extremely valuable, right? And I think he kind of embodies what it means to be a commander. He's got this great playmaking ability. He's got, again, this kind of there's just knack for being tough in the run game, relatively tough given his size, but he's a special football player. And so I don't think because Cooper DeJean had a good year, I don't think it diminishes from what Mike Sainristil did. And I think it's kind of, that's the beauty and the terror of the draft, right? Is like they both can be good, And I think you get 2 picks for this, right? What was the other pick? I know you said it already. I forgot.
Well, Sinnott. It was 50 and 53 for 40. I think there might have been some pick swapping and stuff later. But that's the big one is you had Sinnott or 50 and 53. And I think that's the other thing about the trade too, right? Is if Sinnott has a different year and maybe Sinnott turns it around moving forward. We'll talk about him a lot more obviously in a second. But like if he turns it around moving forward and becomes your number one tight end or even a stud number two to pair with whatever, Zach Ertz or whatever else you do at that position, like, okay, you got 2 for 1. And if that one is a quarterback, that's different. If he's a nickel, like there's only so much value there. Like 2 really good players, that's more valuable. And so I guess it's hard because giving air quotes the Eagles to Jayden, yeah, that's gonna hurt you because he's awesome for what they do. But you also got a ton of value back. And then it's ultimately, like from a process standpoint, I'm fine with the trade. You just have to nail the picks. And it seems like they did that with Mikey. And then, if Sinnott is different, then, like if you miss a draft pick, the problem is you miss the draft pick. I actually don't think that affects the trade, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I think just like trust the process. And I'm always a big believer. It's like, let's say you have the same grade on Mike Sainristil and Cooper DeJean, but you trade it out. So like, I think for example, like when you make the trade, they're like, oh, they could pick Mike Sainristil or they could pick Cooper DeJean. We're okay with that because we're 3 picks later and one of them will be there for us, I think is kind of the thought process. And we're going to get another good football player. And so, again, like I said, I'm not sure Cooper can play outside, but Mike, and I wasn't sure about Mikey, but Mikey did a great job of that this year. I think he showed great ball instincts. He showed great competitive toughness. And I don't think you want him living there full time, but I think you get a guy who's a competitive, tough, smart football player that, made a lot of plays on the football this year. And that's ultimately what you want. And that's what they wanted to prioritize. So I think, I don't want to say Mikey had like an A+ year, but like I think it's probably like B+, and you feel really good about it. And I think if you get a more solid, and also this is something else that I think is just hard to overstate here. You started the preseason as a nickel player. You learned nickel.
Right.
And then you moved mid-season to outside corner. Like, and we've seen guys here over the last couple of years who've messed that up bad. They just have had a hard time with the transition. And it was almost seamless for him. So again, like, to speak to your football intellect, to learn multiple positions in the defense seamlessly and just be that kind of professional, I think is a huge testament to him and a huge testament to what he did this year.
For sure. And again, he is a cornerstone piece in a way that is hard to stress, hard to underscore. Like he's probably one of the most untouchable guys on the roster in terms of what he means to being a commander. And he's their standard setter moving forward. Like he is going to take, like we mentioned, when Bobby or when Jayden signed a jersey and gave it to Bobby on locker cleanout day, he said, you set the standard. Like Jayden and Mikey are the 2 guys that are going to uphold the Bobby Wagner standard long after Bobby's gone. And maybe Bobby's back this year. I'm not trying to push Bobby Wagner out the door. Bobby, please come back by all means. But those are the 2 guys that are going to uphold that standard moving forward. And I think that is important to point out in terms of the value that you get on Mike Sainristil on top of what you got on the field, which was, again, a corner in the NFL. He had some really great weeks and he had some really bad weeks, and that's playing corner in this league because it's really freaking hard.